So in the previous page, we said that we can use both primary key and unique as a reserved keywords for declaring the keys for a relation or for a table, right? And you may also wonder what's the difference between the primary key versus unique. So in this page, we want to clarify the differences. So in the standard SQL, there are some requirements for these two keywords. According to the standard SQL requirements, it can be only one primary key for a relation. In other words, given a relation, the primary key can be used at most once inside this table creation, this declaration. However, these keywords can be used for several times for declaring multiple attributes as the unique keys of the relation. So in other words, we can have several unique attributes inside the tables. This is one of the main differences between primary key and unique. Another main difference is that no attribute of a primary key can be null in any tuples or any data records. In other words, given an attribute which is declared as a primary key, so for all the data stored in our database systems, for this primary key attribute, we cannot have null as its value inside the data tuples. It should always have a valid value inside this table. However, if we declare some attributes as unique keys, we allow the data tuples to have nulls inside these entries for this attribute. And there can also be many tuples with a null value. So you can see a difference, right? Primary key, we don't allow is any null value for all the data tuples in our table. For the primary key attribute, we should always have values inside this table for the entries. However, for the unique, these keywords, these corresponding attributes can have nulls, can even have multiple nulls in the data tuples. So you need to remember these two differences. And this is a requirement for the standard SQL, right? You know, SQL actually has different versions depending on the implementation. So SQL standard also allows the DBMS implementer to make their own distinctions between primary key and unique. In other words, depending on your softwares, the database software you are using, they may have different specifications on these two keywords. So you may find some differences in running the code compared versus the lectures on your computer. So you may also find some difference among different database softwares. For example, if you are running the code with a primary key on DB2, which is a database system software from IBM, and versus the Oracle database system, you may find they may have some differences in these two keywords in the implementation. Okay, so the SQL standard also allows the DBMS implementer to do something behind this code in the backend for these two keywords. For example, some DBMS may automatically create an index table in response to the primary key, but not for the unique key. We will mention later what is an index. Index denotes a table, which is a data structure to speed up the search in the backend. And we will cover the index at the very end of the course later. So sometimes the DBMS may create some extra data structures to help the database system to maintain the tables if we declare some attribute as a primary key. And don't do the same action for the unique keywords. Therefore, there will be some extra differences between these two keywords depending on the software you are using. Besides unique and the primary keys two keywords, the SQL actually has extra declaration keywords reserved for the attributes. In this page, we want to show two other declaration keywords you can use for attributes in the table creation. So the first one is not null. This is the keyword. This not null means that the value for this attribute should never be null. If we declare some attributes as not null, and when we add in some data tuples or data into tables, we can never allow this entry, the corresponding entry, to be null in the data tuple. We should always have some values, which are valid values for the attribute. Besides not now, another keyword we can use for the attribute declaration is default, followed by some values. This keyword denotes that if there is no other specific value known for its attribute component in some data tuples, then we can use this default value inside this declaration to enter into the tables automatically. This is very similar to the default value for some attributes when we define some class in the programming course. For example, if we define a car in Java, and for the color of the car, we can give a default value which is black. If we create some objects without declaring this attribute value, then this car will have a black color by default, right? It will be very similar for its default value inside SQL for the table creation. In the bottom, we have an example, right? We create a table for drinkers. This drinker denotes some people drink some beers, right? We have a table for drinkers. It covers several attributes. The first one is the name of a drinker. The name is a char 30. We will declare the name of a drinker as the primary key. We will have the address of a drinker is also the char 50. It will be a string of 50 names, right, for the address of a person. We will have a phone number with char 16 for the drinker. And we can see for the address, we declare it has a default value, default 123 Monroe Street. So in other words, given a drinker, we don't give a specific address for the person. Then the system will enter 123 Monroe Street into the table by default, automatically. Right? So you know what I mean, right? So this default value, this reserved keyword is very useful. It allows the system to maintain a very healthy table inside it with valid values in the tables. So like for example, in your project, if you don't use default value, when you load some data into the tables, you may have lots of entries which are null if you don't specify any values for the attributes. Therefore, these two keywords are very useful.